welcome to Top Secret TV. My name is David Becker. On this week's show we speak with Mark and Carla with the World News Roundup with Between the Lines, and we also speak with George Simpson from the Victorian UFO Research Society about UFOs in Australia and particularly Victoria. But first, Between the Lines with Mark and Carla. Hello Mark, hello Carla.
Hi Dave.
How you going?
I'm good.
Good.
That's good.
All right Mark, we've got some good stories tonight, and what are
Well, carrying on with our government's persecuting the person stories, we're going to start off with humans used in deadly tests.
they? That's a good start.
Indeed. During the apartheid era in South Africa, scientists secretly tested deadly chemical substances on humans to find medical solutions to political problems.
Oh, that sounds good.
Local South African newspaper, The Star, was quoting military sources which said that the tests were carried out by the elite 7th Medical Battalion with the approval of the military. Our friend the military again looking after us.
And it's funny how the medical department or battalions actually conducting these tests, when aren't they supposed to be fixing you up?
Oh yes, always helping.
That's a bit of funny
That's
thing.
our point. They're always helping us. And financed by the sale of drugs, an illegal practice yet again. The human subjects included political prisoners, South African soldiers and bushmen. The military claimed that the tests were designed to cause fear and decrease the fighting capabilities of the enemy.
I'm sure that would do it.
Among the poisons were used thallium.
Thallium, actually.
Thallium?
Yeah.
Gosh, you always correcting me. And apparently a single capsule would be capable when mixed with food, killing 20 to 30 people. Interesting, the elite 7th Medical Battalion also tested electronic equipment which generated several frequencies to induce psychological damage. Wonder if they got the technology from the CIA.
Well, who
Everybody's
knows?
friend.
Who
Everybody's
knows?
friend.
But I just wouldn't be having dinner on the South African government's chef.
No,
Thanks.
no.
Next one. Here we go. Aliens. They are not our enemies.
Popular
I can tell
topic.
you that. During August last year, when the movie ID4 was released, one Bertrand Schmidt from Brisbane was outside the cinemas distributing leaflets saying that the horrible Hollywood producers of the movies were giving us the wrong impression of aliens. Let's not be frightened of aliens, he said. We need to accept the unknown.
Right.
Mr. Schmidt from the International Raelian Movement believes that the Raelians were the aliens who were supposed to be responsible for creating the human race in the first place. That rhymes well. The
Yeah,
Raelians were the
many
aliens.
theories on it, and we've been asking questions all our life. Where are we? Why are we here? And here we are. We've got it for you.
Well, George
Aliens
Schmidt
moves.
says that we actually need to become more loving and peaceful sometime before the year 2035 so that the aliens will come back. But at the rate at which Hollywood movies are producing such gruesome effects, I don't think they will be coming back if they intend to at all.
No. No. Oh, well, off the ETs. Now, upcoming events, we've got the Nexus Conference for 1997. It's being held on May 24th and 25th at the Gazebo Hotel in Sydney.
Oh, and you've got Robert Bouval speaking at that one about the recent discoveries and research concerning the Great Pyramid and Sphinx. That'd be really exciting. He's also the co-author of The Orion Mystery and The Keepers of Genesis. Two
Right.
good reads.
Right. Also, we've got Linda Moulton Ho, author of The Alien Harvest, talking about the latest in UFO research.
And Simon Treeland, retired from British intelligence, presents insights into conspiracies and cover-ups and the future.
Right. A man called Harlan Garrard, one of America's foremost researchers into mind control. Don Maish, Australia's leading independent researcher and lobbyist into the effects of electromagnetic fields, TV, phone towers and the power lines' effect on humans.
And to top it off, Anthony Hansen, inventor and researcher into Tesla technology, will be there also.
Alrighty.
And where do you get that information?
Now, if you want to talk to us, write to Nexus Magazine at PO Box 30, Malverton, Queensland, 4560, or phone 075 442 9280.
Now, there's going to be another major alternative conference on, the Third World Congress on Cancer, to be held at Darwin in the Northern Territory, April 25th to 27th. I think they've got 8 international speakers exploring the very latest and successful treatments already being used in Europe, China and Japan. If you want more information on that, contact the Independent Medical Research Suite 401, BMA House, 135 Macquarie Street, Sydney 2000, or phone 02 247 5366.
Now, there are a few groups you can contact, as I said before, but I didn't actually say the right thing. But here they come. You've got the Astro Network, the Phenomena Research Australia, who we had on the show a few weeks ago.
And don't forget the Melbourne Nexus Association.
Yes, the Melbourne Nexus Association. They meet every second Wednesday night. The Tesla Society, World Harmony, also on our show not long ago. Global Energy Network International, also on the show. Victorian UFO Research Society, also already had them on our show.
More.
So if you want to contact any of them, you should ring us. Now, you should ring right to Alan James. He's the producer of TSTV. He can be contacted at PO Box 235, Kangaroo Ground, 3097.
And don't forget to include a self-addressed envelope.
No,
It's important.
not at all. I think that's over to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks, Carla.
You're
As
welcome.
usual, bringing us fantastic news that nobody else seems to bother about.
True. The spooky news.
Indeed.
We will touch it.
Yes.
That's the way we like it.
We will
Yes.
go where no one dares to go.
Now, we actually have a few strange headlines with us tonight as well.
do we
Some
now?
headlines that you might not be seeing in tomorrow's newspapers.
Oh, give
If
them
we
to
can-
us.
We can look towards the monitor. We'll see the first of these headlines. Naked man saved by a flying car sparks outcry. Now, what do you think that one might be about?
God knows. I think he could have been doing a little bit of work on the car.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a hot night.
Might have
Very
got
hot night.
Put
Yeah.
one of his
As any
tools.
proctologist says, I fell over. It was 1,000,000 to 1.
Ow.
How does that explain the sparks, though? Was it a power tool?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It's a little bit of charge going through it, I'd say.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And what's the next one? We've got another couple of those strange
He wasn't too badly
headlines
hurt,
coming
though,
up.
by the way, folks.
Oh, wasn't he?
Not
oh,
too
that's
bad.
good.
No.
That's good. Reality blamed for rise in deaths by gunfire. Now, it's a bit of a deep one, that one.
Oh, very. That's a
Yes.
very deep one. Oh, but I'd say the illusion would be worse, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think it's a like a Maya thing or whatever it's called. You know, the Indian word for illusion. You know that all reality is an illusion.
Oh, really, Dave?
Maybe
That
it's-
is profound.
Ah,
I can
yes,
tell you that
yes.
one.
I read that on
Always
the back of a
profound.
Weet-Bix packet this morning.
Ah. Well,
When you're
Weet-Bix can be
playing with a
very
little
insightful.
alien
Yeah, the 1,000 little plastic aliens and the one cornflake. I found the cornflake.
Yeah. Lucky boy.
Yeah. Okay,
right.
and we have one more.
We do?
One out there? No, we don't.
No?
Okay.
Oh, that's,
All right,
that's
well-
the strange thing.
Yeah, well, in that case, I think we should probably speak to our first guest, George. So thanks once again.
You're welcome.
And I'll
Thanks,
see you
Dave.
next week.
Not a problem.
See you
Dave.
then.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, our next guest, George Simpson from Victorian UFO Research Society. George has been a member of UFOs for some years and he is part of the committee, and he's going to actually come on and let us know a little bit about some of the UFO cases in Victoria and Australia. So we'll be back after this break with George Simpson. See you shortly. Hello, George.
Hello, David. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you.
That's good. Now,
Nice
welcome
to be
back
here.
to the show.
Yeah, it's good to be here again.
Yeah,
That's great.
last time we spoke about the role of UFOs and what you do, and very briefly touched on some of the cases. This time we're going to get in a bit more in depth on some of the cases. So can you start off by perhaps giving us an overview of the UFO scene internationally and specifically in Australia?
Well, it's a huge subject. There's so many reports happening, so many things happening all around the world, all the time, and it started so long ago too. As far back as in the 1890s, people were reporting seeing airships all over the world, and all the newspapers had the stories, covered the stories. They're very interesting reading too, because we didn't have airships at that time. Things like that, that probably looked like what we call now the Whitman blimp that you see around Melbourne. With very, very powerful lights and things like that.
Was this in California during those times? I seem to
All around the
remember
world.
Really?
They came from all around the world. We don't have any graphics on them or anything, but the next phase, major phase though, in UFO reports after that would have been the Foo Fighters that you heard about, the World War II.
Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Fighter pilots on missions in Europe during the Second World War, often reported seeing these lights flying around, buzzing their aeroplanes while they were out doing sorties, doing bombing raids and things. And they were photographed as well. There are some photographs that you see in various UFO books and things that were taken at the time.
What do you say to people who
And,
say that's like ball lightning or something like that?
Yeah, ball lightning is one of those things that comes up quite often. It very rarely explains what was seen, but the Foo Fighters, well, there would have been a heck of a lot of ball lightning happening in the one area at the one time.
With no storms as well.
It's a pretty rare event, ball lightning.
Yeah.
It's not all that common. For it to be sort of concentrated in that one area during World War II, it doesn't quite really fit. It's one of those explanations you come up with, but it doesn't really probably fit what was really happening at the time. I don't think ball lightning would sort of follow the aeroplanes and buzz them in their wingtips, and then take off. Ball lightning sort of just floats around and then sort of either fades out or blows up.
Sort of
something
randomly, whereas this was seemed to be under some sort of meaningful control.
They seem to have some sort of intelligent control behind them. The next thing that happened after the Second World War was around 1947, when Kenneth Arnold made his first sighting over Mount Rainier in America, and that went all around news headlines all around the world. That made headlines because it was a pilot that had a lot of airtime. He was a trained observer, and he saw something really unusual that was travelling at an incredible speed. It was a whole, like a stack of objects flying together at very high speed, and they clocked it at about 1,700 kilometres an hour or something back then.
That's far in excess of speeds they could go at that time, obviously.
Yeah, and behaving in a strange way, sort of skipping along in the air. He said it was much like the way a rock would skip if you threw it across water. And then one of the press people at the time said, like if you threw a saucer across the water, and thus the name flying saucer came along. But he didn't describe a saucer-shaped object, though. What he described was more like a flying wing. But it was a series of them, about 9 of them, and they were glistening in the sunshine as they sort of bounced across the sky at very high speed. A very strange sighting, and he was believed. In fact, there was a press reception for him when he landed and was climbing out of the airplane. He was sort of hounded by the press at that point, because the story got around the world while he was still in the air, and when he landed the plane they came and asked him all the questions.
So, to digress a little, the role of the media in UFOs and encounters seems to have changed a little bit, but from what you're saying, it sounds as though the media were more accepting or more prepared to give the story a go or listen to it. Is that true?
Yeah, the same with our media too in Australia. I've been to the National Library and looked up the newspapers. I was trying to find out whether there was anything about the Roswell case that got into our papers at the time, and I was researching all that in the library, and I couldn't find anything about Roswell in our papers, but in the Age and the Herald and the Sun, in July 1947, there were several articles about people watching these flying discs going over Australia.
Unrelated to Roswell?
Unrelated, yeah. Flying over Sydney, over Melbourne. They're in the archives for anybody to have a look at. And they're very interesting little stories to read. And interestingly, even at that time, there was a professor in New South Wales who came up with a prosaic explanation for it. And he said that anybody who stares at the sky long enough is going to see spots before their eyes, and that's all they're seeing. And yet there was hundreds of people seeing these unusual circular craft zooming across Australia. So it's definitely a worldwide phenomenon, and that's sort of how it started.
Right. Well, that brings us up to the sort of modern day situation. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the cases in Australia or perhaps in Victoria? For example, the Seaford to Aspendale case?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because that flew right over my house.
Really? You saw it?
But no, I wasn't home.
Bummer.
I just wasn't there when it happened. But that illustrates a lot of different things about this whole phenomenon too, the UFO phenomenon. The lady that reported it to us lived in a neighbouring suburb to us. She lived in Edithvale, and she was looking out of her kitchen window doing the dishes one night, and she was looking towards Seaford, and so my place is in a direct line with her, with the sighting. And I was at work at the time, so I missed it, and I got home about half an hour after it happened. But she saw this very bright light on the horizon, and saw it coming towards her, and she got her husband to come and have a look as well, and they ran out in their backyard and watched this thing go over, and it went right over them. And she said it was only 500 feet up, and she said it was the size of a football oval, and it was an oval shape, and it reminded her of a football oval in size as it went over, and it was totally silent. Now, she was knocking on my door wanting to tell me about it. Now,
she knew that your occupation?
Well, she knew that I was involved with UFO research.
Yep.
She overheard my wife talking to another lady about UFOs and about the fact that their husbands were involved with UFOs or something to do with it. And she laughed at them. She was a skeptic. Then she saw this thing go over, and Viewforce at the time didn't have our phone book. Our phone number wasn't in the phone book at the time, so she couldn't ring up Viewforce and report it. But then she remembered that she'd heard my wife talking about it, so she came to our place to report it to me. And then she was really excited. The next morning she came to my place and she was really hyped up and excited about it.
And this is a die-hard skeptic.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. She said to me, "Now I know they're here." And I said, "Excuse me, who's
a big
here? What are,
leap,
you,
yeah.
what are you talking about?" One minute she's laughing and it's next minute she's saying, "They're here." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, this thing's so big." She said, "We can't make things that big that can fly around and be totally silent."
So there's multiple assumptions in that statement. How do we know we can't make things that big that fly around totally silent?
Maybe it's a top secret government project or something. Maybe.
It's possible.
I
The
don't
stealth
know.
was virtually unknown.
Yeah.
You know, some years ago.
Yeah, but it was really interesting the way that she changed. But also, I spoke to her just the other day on the phone just to see if we could talk about her case, if she was okay with that. And she said, "Oh, it must have been about 3 years ago." And I've worked it out. It was actually 4 years ago now that happened. And every day she still looks at the sky
Really?
to see if there's anything flying around. Every day when she does her dishes, she's looking, and when they're driving around, any plane that they see flying around, she's going through this sort of thing, which I would describe as a kind of a post-close encounter depression kind of thing, because it's such an exciting thing to see something so unusual and so big, and so it's such a rare thing.
And it's very heavy with meaning. I mean, an event like that could change the way you view the universe.
Well,
you
it
know?
totally changed her perspective.
Yeah.
And she wants to see it again. I said to her, "Would you like to see it again if you could?" You know, she said, "I'd love to see it again, but these things don't happen every day."
Yeah.
So she'd really like to see it happen again.
Oh, I think we all would actually.
I wish I'd been home because, I was coming home from work when it happened, and I missed it.
Actually, as a bit of an aside, have you seen a UFO?
Well, I've seen a number of things that don't conform to normal things that you see, but they've always been fairly distant. One I saw one day, I was a student and I was just taking a break from doing my homework, and I just looked up at out the window, and I saw this thing go over, and it was like something in orbit. I would describe it best if you in the daytime though. Like at night time, you can see a satellite go right over the sky, and you can sort of see how steady it is.
Yeah.
Well, this was as steady as that, but it was in the middle of the day. It was a blue sky, and it was a very small, pale, white circular object that just went from the zenith point right down to the horizon. It was going from north to south. I'd say it was in a polar orbit, and it was in the middle of the day. But I just managed. The movement caught my eye, so
Yeah.
I only saw it because it was moving. And I reckon if you had 100 people looking, they wouldn't have even noticed it. Yeah, I just happened to be focusing in the right spot when I saw it.
Yeah, it's one of those things, being in the right place at the right time, I guess.
Now-
Another gentleman who was actually in the right place at the right time, well, wrong place, wrong time, some might argue, Frederick Valenti, another famous Australian case. Can you tell us about
Yeah,
that?
well, we did touch on that a little bit at the last time we were on. That photograph that we had, that graphic is there at the moment on the board. The photo taken by the plumber Roy Manifold. Now, he didn't see that when he took the photograph. He just took a few photos and then went inside. But the thing was, that photograph eventually got published in either Post magazine or something like that. Around the time that happened, it would have been around 1978, 1979, because he didn't get his photos developed immediately, so he didn't discover the picture straight away.
Right.
But when he realised he had that and it had been published, he got the negative and he put it in the bank. He thought he'd keep it safe in the bank, and it's gone missing from his file in the bank.
Really?
So, why?
Well, actually,
You'd think it would be safe in the bank.
Yeah,
and it's
indeed,
gone
anywhere.
missing.
Yeah.
And that's a close-up.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not particularly sought after by, any merchant banker or something like Alan Bond might want.
I don't know how that could happen.
But that brings up a very interesting point, which is illustrated by the Westall High School case, where there's some sort of interference or possible interference happening. Can you tell us a little bit about that case?
That's a really nice case too. That happened in the 1969, I think it was, in the late 60s. Some students in the school were doing physical education. They were outside and they saw this object, this classic UFO object, classic flying saucer thing, come down and land in the paddock opposite the school, or near
And
the
there
school.
was some 100 students or so, and half a dozen
There was
teachers?
quite a few, and quite a few, and the principal of the school told everybody to be quiet and forbade them to talk to the press. Interestingly,
Wow.
Paul Norman and Judy McGee from Viewforce came along and investigated that case and took some photographs, and there was definitely like a typical circular crop circle, kind of a swirl pattern in the grass. And a few days later, the army came along and parked all their trucks in there and burnt all the grass.
An event that they don't like do every week.
Yeah, you've got to wonder, why would they bother to do that? It was just a depression in the grass where this thing had landed.
Yeah, and I believe they told people who asked that very question, I believe they were told that it was a standard burning off fire exercise kind of thing.
There you go, you can't have fires near schools, can you?
Yeah, yeah, but the army suddenly doing the fire department's job is a tad strange.
There was a bit more to it too. When the object flew away, a lot of light aircraft in the area followed it. But there were never any reports that came.
Indeed, actually, I
About that.
remember a fact about that. One of the light aircraft, they took down the numbers on it and then tried to trace its registration. It was unregistered. This was a Cessna chasing a UFO that's unregistered.
That's
a
interesting,
little strange,
isn't it?
isn't it?
Where did
Yeah.
that come from?
Yeah, indeed. Who owns it? Okay, I just want to get on to abduction, a sort of a bit of a sideways
yeah.
leap. Can you tell us about some of the Australian abduction cases in general and whether there's any similarities or differences to the US experience?
Well, they seem to follow the same kind of a pattern, exactly.
Can you describe that?
Well, the pattern where somebody says that they get disturbed in the middle of the night and get escorted away, and they're missing for a few hours and they can't remember anything happening, and they just remember being returned to their home, but they can't remember anything that happened in the meantime.
Right, and then often regression therapy later brings back the memories.
Well, they don't normally have to have regression. They don't. Well, that's probably the only way to get the real details of what's happened. But often they don't want to do that because they have a great fear that they're going to discover something that they'd rather not know about. In America, people that report those sort of cases refer to rape counsellors, and you've got to think about it in those sort of terms. These people are being medically probed and all sorts of things are happening to them without their consent.
So it's a violation
it's
similar to rape.
definitely a violation of people's rights. The people that there's a few different types of people over the last 3 or 4 years. People have been coming to Viewforce in increasing numbers, although it's eased off a bit now. But every now and then people come along and report that they think that they might be an abduction sort of case, and so we talk to them, investigate them, and help them whatever way we can. But we're not really equipped even to do with that. So I can see why in America they do refer people like that on to people that deal with rape situations all the time, because they've got the right kind of training for that sort of thing.
Right.
But the people that go through this thing, the ones that I believe are genuine, are the ones who wish it wasn't happening.
So
Because
that
there are some cases where people, they want to get on TV and they want to get on cameras, they want to tell their story to the world, to the media, and they're trying to get the message out that they've been abducted and all this stuff. The genuine people wish it wasn't happening in their lives. They have perfectly normal lives. They wish it wasn't happening, and they don't want anyone to know about it. They come to us in desperation because you can't go to your doctor and say, look, I've got this cut in my arm. I woke up this morning. It wasn't there when I went to bed last night. I don't know how I got it, but I think the aliens did it. The doctor's going to write out this certificate right on the spot.
Valium or something.
Yeah, you need tranquilising, or you need to go off and see a psych or something. So they don't want to do that.
So I mean,
And it's only because we're involved in UFO research that they'll even come to us. But they need someone to talk to. They want someone to talk to.
So, I mean, we've got a situation, particularly in the US, but perhaps to an increasing degree out here in Australia, where you're getting this group of people who are having some sort of experience. I'm not necessarily going to say it's little green men abducting them, but having some sort of experience and then basically being ignored by all the traditional institutions, mainstream medical, government and so forth. And there's very few people out there to help them. Are there many abduction support groups? Like I know of a couple just springing up out of Melbourne out of that need. Do you know of?
Yeah, they
activities
tend to
like that?
form their own groups, and they've done that in Sydney as well. They really have to do that because there's really nobody that's really equipped to deal with their problem, and they need to get together with other people that have shared the same experience so that they can actually
support each other and stuff.
come to some sort of terms with the problem themselves.
Yeah.
There's no way that they can stop it happening. I know when Project Blue Book was closed by the American Air Force in 1969, they said that there was absolutely no need to go on with UFO research because it posed no threat to humanity or to society. And yet now, years later, we have these people that are being really psychologically disturbed by what's happening to them, and they've got nobody to turn to.
Yeah.
And I'd reckon that's some sort of a threat to society, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would agree with you. And in fact, recently, as we were talking in the break, it's taken a bit of a sinister turn with, for those of you out there, abduction. Quite often, cattle mutilation goes along with it, or at least happens in the same area quite a lot. And now they're apparently mutilating people.
Yeah, there's been a lot of controversy over whether or not UFO experiences, or whether the UFO phenomenon is related at all to the mutilated cattle kind of stories.
Really, they
Like-
might be completely unrelated.
Yeah,
things.
here's a picture from a British UFO magazine, which is I don't know if it's
If
I
we
got
can
up
get
in the
a
right place.
zoom in on that.
That top photo there is a typical a typical case, the sort of thing that happens to the animal.
Right. And so you see its
that's a bit-
jaws being lasered out or incised out.
Yeah, some sort of cutting. There's no blood visible at the site, and the thing has had organs removed and things like that, and all the blood drained from the body.
And often even organs coming out through small holes too, isn't it? That
well-
would apparently be impossible. Unless you
Yeah,
liquefied the organ or
It's
something.
very, very strange phenomenon. Linda Moulton Howe did a documentary about it, and she's coming out here apparently to talk about it at a conference. Well, that's been happening with cattle for a long time, but it's taken, as you said, taken a far sinister turn, more sinister turn. We haven't found anything like this happening in Australia, by the way.
No cattle
I don't know
mutilations
of
at
any
all?
cattle mutilation cases in Australia that we've heard of.
But it's thousands, literally thousands in the States.
Yeah, in
isn't
the
it?
States it's really, really big. But now this has happened, which is here's a photograph here of a person that's had the same thing done to them,
Okay, yeah.
and that was in a place called Guaraparinga in South America. There it is there. And it's a really nasty, sinister sort of thing to happen.
Yeah.
There's apparently more than one person. They've taken all of his lips and his tongue out and his eyes. Again, whether or not that's definitely related to the UFO phenomenon hasn't been proven, but it hasn't been disproven either.
And whatever is happening, it's worthy of examination.
According to Linda Moulton Howe, some of the people that she's interviewed have actually seen UFOs and aliens actually taking the cows and taking them away.
That's very interesting.
So we don't know what's going on, but it's pretty nasty, really.
Indeed. All right, well, that's all we have time for, George. Thanks once again for
No,
coming
Dave.
in.
No worries.
And we'll be speaking to you in the near future again.
Yep.
So that's all we have time for this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with more exciting stories and interviews. So stay tuned for more Optus Local Vision, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.